We are currently living through a collective moral panic. Open any social feed and you'll find people screaming about AI slop, pointing at nonsense visuals and claiming that artificial intelligence is ruining the internet. But this entire narrative is a massive deflection. AI didn't break the internet, it just stopped pretending. It's the industrialization of a process we've been doing manually for a decade. At the heart of the outrage is the labor theory of value trap. We have been conditioned to believe that effort equals quality. We fetishize the struggle of the artist, as if suffering somehow injects a soul into the product. But let's be honest, the audience doesn't consume your 40 hours of rendering, they consume the experience, the final product. If a hand-drawn animation and a well-prompted AI scene evoke the exact same emotion, the only difference is the scarcity of labor. People got used to treating effort like proof of worth. Now that AI removes visible effort, that illusion breaks, and instead of questioning the assumption, they attack the result. Demanding manual labor just for the sake of it isn't art, it's creative martyrdom. Critics point to AI slop and say, see, low effort creates garbage. But they ignore the mountains of high-effort garbage produced by humans. A $200 million Hollywood blockbuster can be a high-effort disaster with no soul and a terrible script. A low-effort AI-generated ambient video can provide genuine value to millions of people seeking sleep or focus. Effort is a neutral variable. It can produce gold or lead. Using it as a metric for quality is like judging a book by how heavy it is. Low effort is a slur used by those who are terrified of being outcompeted by people with better ideas and faster tools. If your only competitive advantage is that you work harder at a task that can now be automated, you aren't an artist, you're a manual laborer in denial. The goal of technology has always been to minimize effort to maximize output. To argue against low effort is to argue against the very progress that made digital content creation possible in the first place.
People talk about AI polluting a previously pure digital landscape. This is pure historical revisionism. If the issue were truly about low-quality content, then the criticism would be consistent. It isn't. Before generative tools, the internet was already drowning in human slop. We had pink slime SEO journalism. We had entire categories of massively popular content that are repetitive, formulaic, and minimal in effort. Reaction videos, trend clones, simple challenges, endless variations of the same idea. People don't call that a cultural collapse. They don't write essays about the death of originality every time it trends. They watch it. They share it. They make more of it. So when the same patterns appear with AI and suddenly get labeled slop, the inconsistency becomes obvious. The standard isn't being applied equally. This is where the conversation usually goes off track. Platforms are not designed to surface what is good, deep, or original. They're designed to maximize engagement. If an algorithm sees that a nonsensical AI-generated video keeps a viewer on the app for 3 minutes, it will push that video over a deep, philosophical, human-made essay that people click away from after 5 seconds. This was true before AI, and it remains true now. So when people complain about the spread of slop, what they're actually reacting to is a system that rewards attention capture over substance. AI didn't create that system, it just operates within it, more efficiently. If it's truly slop, why are so many people watching it? Because AI acts as a mirror for our own consumption habits, feeding the lizard brain exactly what it clicks on. If the algorithm pushes nonsensical AI images, it's because humans, by the millions, are clicking on them. It's time to stop romanticizing the grind and start admitting that the system was built for slop long before the machines arrived.
Enter the authenticity fetish. YouTubers love to talk about authenticity as if it is a real, measurable quality, a kind of creative truth that separates genuine creators from everyone else. They romanticize their channels as a divine spark of inspiration, but beneath the curtain, it is driven less by expression and more by incentives, money, metrics, and growth.
Creators today analyze performance metrics, study successful videos, copy formats, pacing, thumbnails, optimize content based on what works. They reverse engineer virality. They make decisions based on patterns and probabilities. In other words, they are also optimizing for statistical likelihood. So what people call authenticity is often just well-executed imitation, not pure expression, not originality in any meaningful sense, a refined version of what already works. AI doesn't introduce that behavior, it exposes it. Authenticity has been reduced to a set of tactical cues. The template: sit on the floor, use a low-quality camera, look tired, use a "we need to talk" thumbnail, talk about your burnout. These aren't genuine moments of human connection, they are conversion tactics. Creators know that unpolished content yields higher trust metrics. When you turn being yourself into a strategy to increase your average view duration, you aren't being authentic, you're being an actor in a commercial for your own brand. The algorithm is a filter that kills true originality. If a creator makes something truly unique that doesn't fit the pattern, the algorithm buries it. To survive, creators must adapt to the pattern. The result? We see thousands of creators using the exact same Mr. Beast editing style, the exact same lo-fi aesthetic, and the exact same video essay voice. They use the same hooks, the same jokes, and the same color grades. This is human slop. It is the sound of millions of people trying to sound exactly like the person who is currently viral. Where is the authenticity in a sea of identical clones chasing a single retention graph? Authenticity is the lie creators tell themselves so they can sleep at night while they check their analytics to see if their soul is trending. There is no real you on the internet. There is only the optimized version, the version that the algorithm allowed to live. If you are successful, it is because you have successfully killed your own uniqueness and replaced it with a series of high-converting patterns. AI isn't the death of authenticity, it's just the first thing in history that's too efficient to bother lying about it. We are simply reliving the Luddite cycle. Every major technological shift in art was met with the exact same soulless argument. When the camera was invented, painters called it a mechanical cheat. When the synthesizer appeared, musicians claimed it wasn't real music because it lacked physical vibration. We have a habit of calling a tool slop or cheating until it becomes so ubiquitous that we forget we ever hated it. The human touch is always just a name for the previous generation's technology. The human touch argument is the ultimate creative PR spin. It functions as a secular version of divine inspiration, a way to wrap mechanical, repetitive labor in a shroud of mysticism so it doesn't look like what it actually is: manufacturing. The biggest lie in the human touch narrative is that soul or meaning is a substance injected into a file during production. The human touch argument tries to tell the viewer their own internal experience is invalid because the source wasn't a biological entity sweating over a keyboard. It's a form of emotional gatekeeping. The human touch suggests that humans create from a vacuum of pure original inspiration. In reality, most authentic creators are just biological algorithms. They scan the market. They copy the exact same editing styles, color grades, and speech patterns. Where is the magic in a creator who is manually performing the exact same optimization steps an AI does in seconds? It's not a touch, it's mimicry with a slower processor. Society has a pathological need to romanticize labor to make the grind palatable. If we admit that a machine can do creative work, we have to admit that much of what we define as human is actually just predictable pattern recognition. We romanticize the struggle, because if there's no struggle, the result feels unearned. But the universe doesn't care about earning a result. A waterfall is beautiful without effort. A mathematical fractal is complex without a creator. The human touch is a security blanket for an era terrified of becoming obsolete. It's easier to believe in something mystical than to admit that most creative work is just optimized, predictable choices. What people call authenticity is often just pattern recognition with a face attached to it. Intentionality is what matters, and you don't need to manually move every pixel to have a vision. The touch isn't the labor, it's the decision.
Critics will often refuse to click on a video or click away instantly the moment they identify an AI-generated image. They claim they are protecting their attention from slop. This is intellectual laziness disguised as moral superiority. If you claim to be interested in a philosophical critique of labor, but you dismiss that critique because the background image was generated by a prompt rather than a paintbrush, you aren't an intellectual. You are a pixel inspector. In any other medium, we prioritize the message. If a brilliant scientific paper is printed on cheap paper, the science remains brilliant. If a revolutionary speech is delivered through a low-quality microphone, the words still have power. In video content, we have decided that the background asset, the wallpaper of the idea, matters more than the idea itself. It is a shallow, aesthetic-first mindset that prioritizes the how over the what. People confuse illustration with fine art. When a creator uses AI to visualize an abstract concept, like a library reclaimed by nature or a dark, minimalist void, the image is acting as visual shorthand. It is a tool for communication, not a masterpiece to be hung in a gallery. To reject a point because of its illustration is like refusing to read a book because you don't like the font. It's a category error. There is a segment of the audience that spends the entire video searching for tells, six fingers, weird textures, or AI artifacts. The irony, while they are busy inspecting the pixels for errors, they are completely failing to engage with the logic of the argument. They've replaced critical thinking with pattern detection. They feel smart because they spotted an AI image, but they are actually proving they are too distracted by the surface to dive into the substance. If you refuse to engage with an idea because the image behind it was generated by an algorithm, you are admitting that your attention is governed by aesthetics, not intellect. You are claiming to value humanity, yet you are acting like a machine, filtering content based on binary metadata rather than critical analysis. You aren't fighting for the artists. You are proving that you are a shallow consumer who can be distracted from a world-changing idea by a slightly off texture in the background. The human touch you claim to miss isn't found in the pixels, it's found in the argument. If you can't see the difference, maybe you're the one lacking the soul.
Before AI, creating polished visuals, animations, or large amounts of content required skill, time, or money. That naturally limited how much could be produced. Scarcity created perceived value. Now that those barriers are lower, the supply has exploded. When something becomes abundant, it feels less special. Not because it's worse, but because it's no longer rare. This is the real shift. Not a collapse in quality, but a collapse in exclusivity. Some of the backlash is simply resistance to that shift. This used to be hard. Not everyone could do this. Translated, this used to give me an advantage. When tools become more accessible, that advantage shrinks. What used to signal skill becomes easier to replicate, and that creates discomfort. Labeling things as slop becomes a way to dismiss that change without addressing it directly. If you strip away the emotional language, the situation becomes clear. Low-effort, repetitive content already existed. People were already optimizing for engagement.
Platforms were already rewarding what captures attention. Audiences were already consuming it. AI didn't invent any of this. It accelerated it, scaled it, and made it impossible to ignore. The patterns were always there. Now they're just more visible. And yes, it's about money. Underneath all the talk of art, meaning, and expression, there's a more practical driver: monetization. Content is shaped by ad revenue, clicks, watch time, and growth. People present what they do as creative expression, but optimize for performance. That's not unique to AI. That's the structure of the platform. The difference is that AI makes it easier to produce content within that structure at scale. So what are people actually reacting to? Not just bad content or just AI. They're reacting to a realization that effort was never a reliable measure of value, that originality is often exaggerated, that authenticity is more constructed than people admit, and that the system rewards what people engage with, not what they claim to value. That's uncomfortable, because it shifts the focus away from the tool and back onto human behavior.
We have spent a century worshiping a ghost. We called it the human touch because we were too terrified to admit that our creativity is just a sophisticated form of pattern recognition. We romanticized the struggle of the artist because if the process isn't painful, we don't know how to justify the price tag. But the curtain has been burned down. AI isn't the monster that killed art, it's the coroner performing the autopsy on a corpse that died decades ago. It has exposed the authenticity fetish for what it always was, a marketing filter, a status symbol for a creative class that values the theater of labor more than the utility of the idea. The slop you see on your feed isn't a glitch, it's an honest mirror. It is the raw, unfiltered output of our own collective desires, stripped of the mystical PR and the high-minded lies we tell ourselves about what we value. The system doesn't want your soul, it wants your pulse. It wants the 3 seconds of your life you give to a thumbnail before you move on to the next hit of dopamine. So stop mourning the magic. It was never there. There's no divine spark in a retention graph. There's no soul in a copy-pasted viral hook. There is only intentionality, the cold, hard choice of what to create and why. The machine is finally honest. The question is, are you?